Welcome back to Take Action News, everybody. David Shuster here. We're continuing our conversation about the Social Security chained CPI. This is the way the Obama administration wants to calculate Social Security benefits. A lot of progressives say would amount to pushing a lot of folks into poverty in the years ahead. Daniel Marins, explain why, and then we'll bring in Spandon, who is the founder, Spandon Chakrabarty, who's the publisher of the peoplesview.net, to respond, who supports the chained CPI. But Daniel, explain what you consider to be the problem with it.
Well, David, I mean, the logic of the chain CPI is basically that as the price of beef goes up, you'll buy more chicken, and therefore the cost of living doesn't go up as quickly because you can adjust to that price increase. Now, our position is that because a disproportionate amount of the expenses that the elderly in particular face are out-of-pocket healthcare costs, and, for example, in 2009, people above the age of 65, healthcare expenses made up 12.9% of their expenses, and people 25 to 64, which is around 5%, that those kinds of expenses are not very easily substitutable. Are you going to replace a double bypass with a hernia? Are you going to replace some kind of a drug that you would normally get with a different kind of drug that serves a different purpose? It's really not clear. And that is why we believe, and many economists, including some economists that are giving this support for political reasons, like Bob Greenstein at the Center on Budget, who is sort of supporting this, I think, as the least bad change that he thinks will occur. But people like Dean Baker, people like Paul Krugman, are all saying that this is not really a more accurate consumer price index for the elderly, and as a result, whatever baseline you want to use, the reduction relative to currently scheduled benefits is, as a result, not worth it and not good policy.
Spandon, is Paul Krugman, Dean Baker, are they wrong?
Yeah, they are wrong. Because first of all, let's talk about what I think Daniel brought up, which is a very valid point, is that the rest of the populace's cost of living is not exactly the same as the seniors' cost of living. Their cost of living adjustment mostly comes from medical expenses, which is true. The question is, are you going to solve the medical expenses problem by throwing, on average, $3 a month at seniors, which is what we're talking about here if it didn't go up as fast? You got to solve medical expenses, that part of it, separately, which the president, by the way, started doing. And I don't, as a side point, I don't hear people from this side ever acknowledging that this president has expanded the social safety net just by the Affordable Care Act more than any president probably since LBJ.
On that point, Daniel Marins, would you acknowledge that the Affordable Care Act may keep some medical expenses in better control, which in turn would then serve seniors better overall, therefore they wouldn't be hurt as much by a chained CPI to inflation?
Look, while the Affordable Care Act was imperfect, I'm delighted that it's in play. I agree that it's an expansion of the social safety net. I don't think, though, that we can say that because idealistically somehow down the road that the cost curve is going to be there's going to be a serious dent in out-of-pocket healthcare costs. I mean, what the president did was like a mouse's size bite in the cost problem, and if you really want to bite into costs, you're going to have to take much more dramatic action. In the meantime, we know for sure that this will reduce the amount of disposable income that seniors have to spend on their health care costs.
Okay, so here's the
thing. How about that point?
Brandon, what is if you had a public option.
Hang on a second. I think I'll get to it.
Go ahead.
I think I'll get to it. So, A, I don't agree that it's a mouse-sized bite out of the healthcare cost in the ACA. B, if you pretend that what's happened in the ACA is a mouse-sized bite, you cannot come back and pretend that, oh, the chain CPI is suddenly a lion-sized bite. Those are not...
Let's talk about how the healthcare law affects...
Wait, I'm not done.
How does it affect their expenses?
We're talking about if someone's
healthcare costs for seniors...
Hold on a second. If someone's benefit in 2012 is $1,000 a month for calculation's sake, and under the current CPI measures, it would go up to $1,030. Under chain CPI, it would go up to $1,027. That's the difference we're talking about. in the Affordable Care Act, if this senior we're talking about, whose benefit just went up, hold on.
Time. It compounds over time. So
I know it compounds over time. Hold on a second.
20 years
so
in,
does inflation, and everything compounds over time. This is why it's a measure of inflation.
Inflation protects.
Hold on.
It's
okay, will you let me? Okay, David, may I finish?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, thank you. And from the Affordable Care Act, continuing on with the analogy, somebody who's just got an increase to a 1027 instead of a 1030 a month, if they go to a doctor visit, their physical checkup once a year, that is taken off their Medicare bill, because under Medicare now you get free checkup or no copay checkups. That's second. If they buy a lot of medications, the Medicare prescription, Medicare Part D gap is being bridged. There is a lot of savings there. So you're talking about the medical costs. Let's talk about medical. Let's actually address medical costs. Let's not pretend that we're going to address medical costs by throwing an extra $3 and adjusting inflation in what is not actually a proper way to adjust inflation. Point number two, very quickly on this, is that age is not the only factor, by the way, where cost of living is different. It has geographical factors. Cost of living goes up faster in urban areas than rural areas. Are we going to adjust differently for rural seniors than urban seniors? Cost of living goes up faster for people who have a given illness. Are we going to divide them up by different illnesses?
Well, actually,
there's a lot of things.
I think that's not such a bad idea. But here's my sort of larger point, and that is, and just so you have a better sense, Ben, and where you're coming from, in terms of if we say, look, we need to do something to somehow fix Social Security, which I think is a loaded term, but let's accept that as an argument. Wouldn't it be better rather than to sort of slow down the growth of benefits, which is your point about what this is? Wouldn't it just be better to raise the cap? So in other words, instead of taxing the first $115,000, we tax, I don't know, say the first $500,000, or we scale it up so that more of that pays for Social Security rather than trying to find the savings in benefits.
Oh, I'm entirely for that. By the way, but I don't think we do one or the other. When Social Security came into existence, 90% of all income was subject to Social Security taxation. Today, it's about 82%. Let's take it back to 90%. I'm even for actually eliminating the cap entirely, which would solve the problem, change CPI or not. But we do not have congressional will to do that. We may have legislative will to take it back up to 90%. And I am entirely for that.
And Daniel, I know that you agree with that. So isn't this a sort of a moot point? If we could get the congressional will to fix Social Security that way, then this whole argument about whether it's a cut or whether it's slowing the growth of benefits doesn't really matter, becomes irrelevant.
Well, that's right, David. I mean, obviously, right now, our Social Security program is one of the most modest pension programs in the entire developed world. I mean, and it's declining in how much it replaces of people's pre-retirement earnings. In 2010, it replaced, for the median typical worker retiring at 65, 37% of their pre-retirement earnings. And in 2030, it's going to replace only 32%. And so the frame that I look at it in is that benefits are already declining in that sense, and due both to the rising retirement age and increasing Medicare Part B premiums, which while I acknowledge many of the gains of the Affordable Care Act are still going up, and that just needs to be accounted for. You're right, David. I think that if we had the congressional will to do that, it would be easier to do that. And what I would say, Span, and where I disagree with you in terms of strategy and tactics, is that I think that we're liable to see the will to do that go up more in the coming years once we get this Tea Party Congress out of office, once more and more young people who tend to be more liberal in the political process, and more once we have more old people as a society and they become more politically powerful.
I have a feeling, Span, you probably agree with that.
Well, I don't necessarily think old people aren't politically powerful. By the way, if you look at...
We're going to hit a commercial. Tell you what, Spanon, please come back. It's great to have you on the program. The website is thepeoplesview.net. Spanon Chakrabarty is the publisher, also an expert on Social Security policy. Spanon, thanks.
I'm not going to get to respond to this?
I promise we'll have you respond next week. How about that? Take Action News continues after this.